The defensive residential complex Kayukovo II of the turn of 7th-6th millennium BC in the north of Western Siberia, experience in reconstruction of architecture and planning structure, based on materials of years 2000-2002, 28-2019. From the 7th millennium BC, hundreds of settlements appear in the north of the West Siberian plain. Their number increases over time and doesn't decrease until the Middle Ages. From the Atlantic period, here formed the landscape and biocenosis, which have changed little until now. This is the zone of the northern and middle taiga located between 58th degree and 65th degree of the northern latitude. The territory administratively belongs to the Khanty-Mansi autonomous region Yugra. Here, on the area of 535,000 square kilometers, there are known 6,000 archaeological monuments, settlements, household, commercial, and ritual sites. A rather high population density of the Western Siberia in antiquity, especially in the early eras, is a unique feature of the region, and also on Eurasian scale. Especially considering that for most of the Holocene, the population of this region led hunter-gatherer lifestyles. The phenomenon remains poorly understood. To the period of 7th-6th millennium BC belong several hundred monuments that encompass several thousand dwellings. There are no exact data, since not all of them have been radiocarbon dated. The age of most of them was determined by the comparative typological method. Of this number of objects, 4 are suggested to be associated with so-called Kayukovo cultural type. The basic eponymous, according to the result of the excavations of which the Kayukovo cultural type was identified, is the fortified settlements of Kayukovo II. Several characteristics have been put forward in order to demonstrate similarities between these sites. Ceramic vessels with a flat base and specific ornaments, stone tools of a specific shape, and, as an especially important feature, architecture, in particular, the regular structure of settlements. Kayukovo II, Kachny Sap II, and Barsova Gora II/9 a circular layout, and the settlement of Kayukovo I has a linear or street two-row layout. Note that massive settlements with elements of fortification appear in the region in larger numbers only from the 14th-9th centuries BC. And defensive residential complexes with a regular layout appear even later, from the 8th-7th centuries BC. The present talk is devoted to the layout of the defensive residential complex Kayukovo II, where the most complex structure was identified. Alongside about 10 other such monuments, the site belonged to a group of unique fortified hunter-gatherer settlements in the Western Siberian plain, dating to the remote times around 6000 Cal BC. Another one, Amnia I, is also being presented here in this session at our conference. The monument is located near Lake Bolshoye Kayukovo on the watershed of the Bolshoy Salim and Bolshoy Yugan rivers, left tributaries of the river Ob. It should be noted that along the watershed plains passed the paths of reindeer movements. Also, in ancient times, the territory was surrounded by a larger number of lakes and streams, which are swampy now. All this taken together characterizes the high provision of the territory with the food resources. Field investigations of the site were carried out in 2000-2002 by an expedition led by O.V. Kardash. In 2018-2019, excavations were continued by an international Russian-German expedition directed by O. Kardash, Neftyugansk, N. Chayirkina, Yekaterinburg, and H. Piezonka, Kyiv. Its chronology is determined on the basis of the radiocarbon dating of 21 samples, 5 of which were AMS dates and 8 were conventional dates. This data is in print. Not all dates correspond to each other. The difference in some reaches 500 to 1500 years. We associate it with the probability of methodological errors of individual laboratories, and the most consistent data is provided by the AMS dating of charcoal and other terrestrial materials. The team of authors of the publication came to the opinion that the period of functioning of the Kayukovo II settlement lay with the first third in the 6th millennium BC. The morphology of the cultural layer and the absence of evidence of rebuilding indicate the continuous and simultaneous existence of the entire structure in the interval of the probably no more of 50 to 100 years. Architecture. Let us note an important feature of the soils of the north of the Western Siberia. Those are sands and sandy loams in which the remains of ancient settlements are well expressed in microrelief for thousands of years, which makes it possible to evaluate the architectural features of both individual constructions and the planning structure of settlements, even before excavation based on surface relief. The planning settlement is being reconstructed based on materials from the excavations and the remains of building visible on the surface. The site had a cruciform structure in plan measuring circa 34 meters in diameter. The entrance to the inner territory of the residential complex was located from the west, and it has been marked by paired fireplaces and hollows. The central building was square in plan, about 6 by 7 meters in size, and was oriented by facades along the northwest-southeast axis. This building was connected by corridors with the other 4 buildings of the complex, each of which had a subrectangular or irregular shape and dimensions up to 4 by 5 meters. The northwestern residential building was connected by a narrow corridor with a small building number 7. A narrow, ditch-shaped corridor led further from it. This construction, not more than 1 meter in width and depth, encircled the area of the residential complex along the outer radius. Based on the analysis of the stratigraphy, planography, and morphology of the cultural layer, we came to the conclusion that these are the remains of the wall structure that surrounded the residential complex. Historical and architectural analysis and an experiment to recreate the outer wall made it possible to present a version of reconstruction. We assume that the ditch was an engineering structure for the construction of the outer wall. It was the foundation of the wall structure which provided its stability in sandy soil through the counterfort structures. It is worth to note its peculiarity, a hollow structure. It provided not only passage but also ventilation of the foundation structure. The architecture of the dwelling is being restored on the basis of the southwest building. The burned structures made it possible to reliably record some of the elements of the building. The dwellings of the complex were located along the perimeter and represented constructions with a pit of about 0.7 to 0.8 meters in depth, 4 by 5 meters in size, irregular in shape with a central hearth and bulk earthen walls, which were supported by a fixed formwork from the set of the thin logs with a diameter of 10 to 12 centimeters installed or vertically. Their bases were fixed in a narrow ditch dug along the perimeter of the pit. There was horizontal floor on which the chopped blocks were laid flat side down. The flat roof was covered with soil and presumably had an opening for the smoke extraction, which would have served also as the main over the hearth entrance. Of particular interests are the stone artifacts, which are few in amount, no more than 50 pieces. These are specific access chisels with a longitudinal groove, symmetrical access wedges, sickle-shaped knives, abrasives, and grinding plates for the sharpening tools. Such instruments are not found on other sites in the region of the Atlantic period. All tools are made using grinding technology and are interpreted as the remains of woodworking tools that got into the cultural layer after the construction work. The tools were made of rocks absent in the north of Western Siberia, but widespread in the southern and middle Urals. The sources of raw materials thus were circa 8,000–12,000 kilometers away from Kayukovo II settlement and were probably obtained in the result of expeditions or trade. Termination of functioning. All constructions, including the outer wall, show the signs of fire. There are no intact items in the material complex that could have been left in the event of accidental fire. Such a flame development in one of the premises of the complex could be easily localized by isolating of the ventilation manhole and other hearth entrance. The outer wall structure is relatively isolated from the buildings. The very fact of a flame development around the entire perimeter seems unlikely, given the area of the structure and the direction of the wind. There is no evidence for a siege because there are no arrowheads, human remains, or other evidence pointing towards such violent action, although it cannot be ruled out. According to today's data, it is possible that deliberate arson of each building and their outer wall, and simultaneously in different parts, led to the burning down of the structure. Deliberate arson could have been part of a ritual activity associated with the termination of the functioning of a special-purpose settlement, not excluding the funeral one. Further excavations are needed to provide answer for these questions. Experiment. According to the study of the material remains of Kayukovo II settlement, as well as taking into account ethnographic data of traditional house constructions among indigenous groups in the Western Siberia taiga, a variant of graphic reconstruction has been created. To justify its credibility, we have conducted an architectural experiment. Through experimental field studies, we tested our reconstruction assumptions and recreated a number of aspects of dwelling. During the experiment, all stages of the construction process used by ancient builders were recreated. There was restored a set of tools, design features of the walls and roof of dwelling, an outer wall with a hollow corridor-shaped foundation, as well as metrology issues. As part of the experiment, we restored the necessary